Hey guys, I'm back to give you something a lot of you asked for. That's right, a review of God's Not Dead 2. I know you guys are super excited about this. I knew I was. I was excited to watch it. I was excited to share my thoughts. It's a gem. Let's just say that. So, let's get started. So first we have to talk about the fact that the main character in this movie is Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I know. When I first saw this, I was so sad, I'm not gonna lie. I was so disappointed. I was like, no, my childhood, no, what drove her to do this? So I looked into it. Her real name is Melissa Hart. I'm gonna call her Sabrina during this whole thing, by the way, just because I want to. That's how I remember her. So, Melissa Hart, she, like I said, played a teenage witch, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, for a decent amount of time. So she went from that to Christian nationalism. That's a crazy switch up. But I wanted to know, like, what the Christian community thought of this and if, like, she had anything to say, and I did find some stuff. So from this one article I read, she said, for the longest time while I played a witch on television, on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the Christian community attacked me for popularizing the magic aspects of that secular TV show. Hart told the Chicago Sun-Times, now it's the opposite. I'm getting grief for playing the good Christian woman who is being persecuted by the outside world. Fair enough. Then she said, today there are a lot of Christians being persecuted for their faith, far beyond the freedoms this country was founded on.
Girl, what the fuck is you talking about?
Okay. Then the last quote I want to share, she told this to CBN. I'm not someone to shy away from controversy. I actually enjoy taking it head on. What we are trying to do here is break down any boundaries and really show Christ's mission of bringing love and tolerance to the world.
Huh?
I'll be honest, when I watch this movie, love and tolerance is not the vibe I got, but, you know, to each their own. Also, within the first couple minutes of this movie, we have a second witch connection. That's right. The mom from Wizards of Waverly Place, if you guys ever watched that on Disney Channel, is in this movie as the student's mom. Now, I know the mom in Wizards of Waverly Place wasn't a witch, but she raised two witches, so I just found that odd that there are two witch connections here. Okay, so Sabrina is a single woman who takes care of her grandpa. She's a high school teacher. Right away, they show her godly spirit by saying the teachers were in the teacher lounge and they were complaining about difficult students. And she said that difficult students were a blessing. And then her coworker says, when is your optimism going to wear off? And she's like, it's not. Okay, so then we have our first classroom scene where there's like kind of this like weird tension with one of the students. They are acting like something's wrong, so she asks her what's wrong. She says nothing. After class, the student who said everything was fine, her name is Brooke, by the way. The teacher, Sabrina, her actual name is Grace, but we're gonna be calling her Sabrina. So she ends up finding the teacher at a coffee shop, and she like sits down with her, and basically the teacher's like asking her what's wrong, and she's like, there actually is something wrong. And she tells her teacher about the fact that her brother died a couple months ago. And the teacher, Sabrina, is like, did he believe in God? And Brooke's like, I don't know. And she's like, well, there comes a point in time where everyone asks themselves that question. And then the student, Brooke, looks at her and says,
Never let anything get to you. How do you do that? Jesus.
So we have that scene where, you know, her insane optimism, her like consistent optimism, and her ability to get through anything is because of Jesus Christ. All right. Now they show the reporter girl from the last movie. You know, the one who had cancer, and then the newsboys, they saved her. Well, they got her to be saved and asked Jesus to come into her heart. Well, she is miraculously healed by the cancer, or from the cancer, and she calls one of the newsboys and tells them, and they're like, this is exactly what you prayed for, yay. And she's like, acting weird about it. Like maybe she's not really happy or like confused or something. I don't know. Either way, her cancer went away. The prayers worked, I guess. I won't lie, this scene made me sad because I feel like when they have these scenes, and I felt this way even as a Christian, when they have these scenes of like, oh, the prayer worked, it makes other people feel bad who have had loved ones pass away, and like sends a specific message. Because like when one of the newsboys was like, prayer, he said, prayer is a powerful thing. God has much bigger plans for you. Does that mean he didn't have big plans for the people who have passed away? That's what that sounds like, I feel like, to other people who don't get that miracle or whatever you want to call it or recover from it. And again, that stuff bothered me even as a Christian. Like my dad died from brain cancer when I was around 21. And when I heard Christians say that kind of stuff, it rubbed me the wrong way because I just feel like talking like that, again, reinforces this idea that God has favorites, that God gives some people special treatment and he has bigger plans for some and not so much for others, which obviously doesn't feel good to hear as an atheist or when you're a Christian. Now Sabrina's back at home with her her grandpa, and talking about the student. And he says,
thing about atheism, it doesn't take away the pain, it just takes away the hope.
Then he talks about how none of the youngins believe in God anymore for some reason. And he says the most basic human right of all is the right to know Jesus. I don't know why, but I have this feeling that this is the only human right they're ever going to talk about in these movies. And the only time they're going to mention human rights. Because a number of Christians, evangelical Christian nationalists I hear these days saying that healthcare isn't a right, food isn't a right, shelter isn't a right, like the most basic things we need to survive is not a right, but being a Christian is a right. And I'm not saying it isn't a right, it is a right to be able to believe in what you want, but I just think that's interesting that they specifically brought up human rights, but only for this, I guess. Real quick side note, one thing I always think about is when like Christian national, like evangelical conservative, whatever, whenever they say that healthcare isn't a human right, people aren't going to work for free, which is not how that would work anyway. But I often think to myself, if there was someone dying at the like steps of a hospital or outside of a hospital, would they be okay with that? Like if we're like actually playing this out in real time, would they truly look at someone dying outside of a hospital and be like, sucks, you don't got the money to pay for it? I've always asked myself that question, or if they don't really like think it through what they're saying. I don't know. Okay, so now we're at the student's home, Brooke's home, where the Salvation Army specifically comes to pick up her brother's old stuff, and she's like sitting in the room and she's really sad. Understandable. And one of the workers from the Salvation Army is like, hey, I found this in your brother's stuff and it was a Bible. And she's like, I would think that you would want this. And so she sees that the Bible has like notes in it, is marked up, like obviously used. And she like thinks to herself, was he a believer? So now we're back at a classroom scene where Sabrina the teenage witch, just kidding, it's more like Sabrina the middle-aged witch, is talking about MLK Jr. and how he was dedicated to being peaceful. And the student Brooke raises her hand and says,
isn't that sort of like what Jesus meant when he said that we should love our enemies?
I knew right away she was going to compare the persecution of Black people to the persecution of Christians.
Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you will be children of your Father in heaven.
She automatically starts talking about persecution, and then she compares it to the persecution MLK Jr. Faced, and you know that she's like comparing Christian persecution, like probably just in the United States, because that's what we're all talking about, and that's like how they talk about it even in the United States, where they are the most powerful group of people. Now some of the students are like texting and stuff under their desks, and they're reporting her or telling their family members and other people that she's talking about Jesus in the classroom. So the teacher gets brought into, I guess, the principal's office, and they're like, did you do this? And she's like, yes. And then after that, they bring in a student in the classroom and like scold her too and say, you have to stay away from this woman, which I feel like is so extremely dramatic. Number one, I don't think even in this situation they would blame the student at all. Number two, is it that extreme that you have to say, don't ever talk to this woman again? Like, come on now. But yeah, I mean, I do understand the school getting upset if there's separation of church and state and she's like talking about Jesus Do I think that they would do something this serious like they are in the movie? No, I don't. I think if she kept doing it, maybe. But it was like one single conversation. I still don't think she should have, but obviously this is going to be dramatized. Obviously, religion is supposed to stay outside of the classroom and not be within like what teachers are talking about, but most evangelical Christians disagree with that. They want to see Christianity in public schools. And we know why a lot of people disagree with that is because we want freedom from religion, but a lot of evangelicals don't see it that way. They don't care about separation of church and state, and they don't care about their religion being shoved into public schools. In fact, a lot of conservative evangelicals advocate for that. And that is also very much apparent in this movie that is also what they advocate for. Now Sabrina goes to the coffee shop again, and you'll never guess who she runs into. You'll never guess it.
Tom Endler, your union-appointed attorney.
That's right, the person who played John Tucker in John Tucker Must Die.
John Tucker.
The actor's name is Jesse McAuliffe? Not sure. When he showed up, my jaw hit the floor. I love the movie John Tucker Must Die. I feel like that was like the peak of like early 2000s movies, just like so good. It was so random. It was just as random as seeing Sabrina and the mom from Wizards of Waverly Place, because I'm like, how do we get here? How do we end up at the, like, especially John Tucker Must Die is such a non-Christian movie. So I don't know. It was just funny to see him. And all I could think about when I saw him is that thong scene. If you know what I'm talking about, where basically they all are wearing thongs while playing basketball. And I just could not get that out of my head. So now John Tucker is her lawyer. Good luck, sister. Okay, so now Sabrina and John Tucker are meeting with the school board, and I think John Tucker's real name is Tom in this movie, but he's John Tucker. They say as long as Sabrina apologizes and promises to never bring up Jesus again, she won't be fired. And she says,
I would rather stand with God and be judged by the world than stand with the world and be judged by God.
Which again is this idea that they are trying to silence me and God, except they would do the same with any other religious person like preaching their religion, especially like Muslims or any other religion. And like I feel like Christianity is the most likely to get away with it because they are the most popular religion in the United States, and plus we're seeing it be put into schools, like the 10 Commandments being put into every public school room in Texas. That's crazy. And a lot of other stuff, but that's like the main one that I think of. And also they are trying to integrate like Christian-based teachings. So I don't know. It's just kind of ridiculous, obviously. Now we have lawyers visiting the students' parents, so Brooke's parents, about how Sabrina violated the separation of church and state. And he also says, think about other kids who are being subjected to this oppressive belief system. I mean, I low-key agree with this evil lawyer that, like, yeah, you shouldn't be indoctrinating kids in school. But obviously, this lawyer gives off intense evil villain energy. Because you've guessed it, he's an atheist. A dirty, dirty atheist. He goes on to say that Ivy League schools will love this. Like, something about, like, she can write a paper about this and they will love this. They're like, it'll get her into any Ivy League school. And it's like, why would that get her into any Ivy League school? And he's like, they will love this. And it's like, okay. I feel like that's like a weird, like, random jab at like colleges and education, because we know how much they demonize college, so that isn't a shock. Then he whips out this line.
We're going to prove once and for all that God is dead.
You have to be joking. The way that I cackled when he said that like a cartoon supervillain. Who talks that way? Who says that? I like how they make it seem like people who want separation of church and state are evil. Like, that's that entire scene is like people who want that separation, they're just evil. They just have an agenda and they just hate God and they hate Christians. Now we see protesters outside the school.
Brooke, this is the last time I'm going to tell you. If you don't stop this right now, there are going to be some consequences.
Yes, that is duct tape over her mouth because she's being silenced, guys. Tell me why it reminded me of people wearing pads on their ears when Trump got... I don't know. That's what it reminded me of, but yes. There's protesting going on. Now we go to court. The fight begins. They are seeing which jury duty people to weed out and which ones they want. The villain, evil, atheist lawyer asks the dude what his favorite show is, and he says Duck Dynasty. Of course they had to bring up Duck Dynasty again. There are so many like weird Christian ads in this movie that I like, or like, I guess not ads, but like promoting something, and it's so funny. It happens so often in this movie. But anyways, the person says they like Duck Dynasty, and he's like, I don't want him to be one of the jurors. Like, I don't want him if he likes Duck Dynasty. Sabrina and John look at each other when he says his favorite show is Duck Dynasty, and they're like, oh, we have someone on your side or on our side, but he gets the boot. Can't have any filthy Duck Dynasty lovers in this courtroom. Then John, Sabrina's lawyer, accepts a juror who says she volunteers at the Salvation Army. Again, bring up the Salvation Army. Which, yeah, they showed them earlier. So they take her. They want her as a juror. Then there's another juror, the evil atheist lawyer villain man kicks out, and it's a guy who said it's weird. He sees a guy's in the military and he assumes he's a Christian because they love God and country, so he gets the boot. I'm not kidding. Like, because, atheists hate the military. And hate veterans, I guess. Now they show the cancer reporter girl again. She's saying now that she's cancer-free again, but now she's saying because she's cancer-free, she's questioning God again. I feel like this is bringing up the whole idea that God lets you suffer so that way you can be closer to him, and when you're not suffering, you're less likely to choose him. Then we see the Chinese student from the last movie, and there's not much happening yet. He's just like in a church with a pastor. There's this pastor that shows up in the last movie and this movie. He's a pastor who helped the atheist professor get saved before he died. I just don't talk about him because he has the most boring storyline ever. Like, there's nothing much to report. He just like interacts with all of the characters throughout the movie for different reasons. So in this instance, he's like helping the Chinese students study the Bible. So John Tucker runs into the super evil atheist lawyer, and it's a super friendly exchange, of course.
You know what hate is, Tom? Real hate. I hate what people like your client stand for.
JK, did you guys forget he was an atheist? You thought he was going to be friendly? You thought he was not going to be hateful. You silly, silly gooses. Of course he was hateful. Of course he was mean. Now we're back in the courtroom. They are duking it out. They're starting to duke it out. The evil lawyer says some weird, strange stuff about how shocking, basically says that she knows the Bible. It's such a weird argument. She knows the Bible so well that means she thinks her religion is better than everybody else's. I don't know what the correlation is there. Like, I'm not getting what that even means. Like, number one, what does that mean? And number two, how is this relevant to the actual case at hand? I think this is just like this idea that the atheist judgment is clouded by their hatred of God. I don't know. Now, John Tucker must die. I'm sorry, I'm being so annoying, is arguing that they will never find separation of church and state in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So they're saying that's fake. That's not real. There is no separation of church and state, which is not shocking to me at all, because like I was just talking about, most Christian nationalists deny that that should even be a thing, which is, yeah, super concerning, kind of the entire problem. Yeah, who could have seen this coming? Then he says we're having Christianity on trial right now. This isn't about the separation of church and state. This isn't about the fact that a teacher talked about her religion in school. This is about Christianity in general, I guess. Christianity's on trial, and they are trying to take away the human right. The human right comes up again. They are trying to take away the human right to believe. He says the most basic human right of all is to choose what you believe, which is not being argued. Nobody's arguing that you can't believe in something. Nobody is arguing that it isn't a human right. It's a nothing burger. Nobody's saying that. That's not what's happening. That's not what we're here for. Then the evil lawyer pulls a witness who is a woman who works at the same school as Sabrina. And this witness basically says, everybody at school knows she's a Christian. It makes us all feel really awkward. Really? Like, it makes you feel so awkward that she is part of a belief system that is the most common and most popular belief system in the United States of America. I just like, and we have this scene.
God bless you. Careful, or you might end up on trial.
No comment. Then later they show a newswoman on the student Brooks TV talking about, we need to stop these fundamentalists.
Woman, this fundamentalist, if you ask me, the religious extremists we need to worry about are the hardcore Christians.
I feel like they did this to get people used to the idea of being called a fundamentalist. Like, it's not a bad thing. And they also use the word extremist. They use it in the same way as being on fire for God. If you guys have ever heard that, I'm sure you have. So I feel like the point of this is getting people comfortable with that label, because I feel like in general it's not seen as a good thing to be a fundamentalist or an extremist, but they're like, hey, that just means that you're doing God's will. That just means you're on fire for God, right? Getting people used to this idea that Christian nationalism is just being a good Christian. Then Sabrina's lawyer, John, he brings a witness up to the stand. It's a black woman from the school. This is relevant to tell you she's a black woman. Harps on her about diversity and tolerance. But he says, like, I guess that doesn't apply to Christians, does it? Are you joking? I feel like them choosing a black woman specifically for this was on purpose, and it is. Wow, no words. Yeah, really honing in on that persecution complex there. Okay, now we are at breakfast with a bunch of pastors, and one says he hears from a friend from the courthouse that they are all being demanded to hand over copies of their sermons from the last 3 months. Then they said, we've ignored this for so long. I don't even know what they mean by this. They're so vague in this scene. I just want to put this out there. To me, it was an extremely vague scene. I think this is on purpose. They said they've ignored this, which I don't know what this is, for so long. So this is what they get. And the one pastor says if they don't do something, they will get persecuted, and says that they are at war with the world. Spiritual warfare. You can't deny that, or you've already lost, is what the main pastor said that has been out like throughout these movies. I thought this thing sounded familiar of pastors having to like give over some sermons to attorneys or whatever. And so I looked into it. And so apparently they're referring to a real life event. It's like very exaggerated, but a real life event in 2014 in Houston, Texas. There was a lawsuit over a new city law called the Houston Equal Rights Act, and it was a non-discrimination law that included protections for LGBTQ people. Gasp. I know, so horrible. So I guess the city's lawyers wanted to see if churches were politically organizing from the pulpit, because this would impact their tax exempt status, because churches aren't supposed to endorse like political candidates and such. So essentially attorneys sent subpoenas to ask a few pastors to hand over some communications And yes, these communications included some sermons that were directly involving politics. Like, they wanted sermons, I guess, that where they were talking about politics. These lawyers ended up backing off really quickly because they got some backlash. What's weird is they are making this scene very vague in the movie, and I feel like they do that on purpose. They don't mention what it's regarding at all. They just say in general they're under attack for being Christians. They suggest it's like this nationwide Christian persecution. It's painted as a nationwide threat to pastors from the States. So they're very much exaggerating the truth here while also being extremely vague. Again, there's a reason for that, but they kind of want to say like it's the state against us. It's the world against us, that kind of thing, and we're going to be persecuted for being Christians. Now we go back to the Chinese student. His atheist dad is home. Yay, right? Some father-son bonding time.
你只需要睁开你的眼睛，你也可以看到放肆。
Wrong. It's not good. The Chinese student tells his dad he needs to open his eyes to the truth. Yeah, exactly. Another atheist beating their child for being Christian. If you remember in the last video, it's not funny, obviously. I mean, this didn't happen. It's not funny if this happens between a child and their parent. It's just so crazy, the stereotypes they put in these movies. But if you remember, the Muslim girl from the last movie was beaten by her Muslim father. And it was all because she was a Christian. That's the reason he beat her. It's just so crazy. The same reason they're giving for this Chinese dad to beat his Chinese son. And it's like, there's not much to say here. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just really gross. Then John and Sabrina are together at her house, and Sabrina comes up with this idea, and she was actually teaching her students history, aka Jesus existing and not faith. You can't fight a fact, she says. So she's going to give this argument that she actually wasn't teaching faith to her students. She was teaching fact. Then we see the Chinese student from the first movie and the student girl from this movie, they meet up and he gets her saved. Now we're back at the courtroom. So yeah, basically the point of this is like, this is another person going against their parents and becoming a Christian. We're back at the courtroom. John brings up Lee Strobel. That's right, Lee Strobel, the guy who wrote The Case for Christ. I actually mentioned him in my last video because basically in past interviews he has said that he was like a terrible person when he was an atheist, and like that's just what being an atheist is. You're like gonna be an alcoholic, you're gonna be bitter, you're gonna be miserable. It's super frustrating. Also, I think that book, The Case for Christ, is not good, but that's just my personal opinion. John asks Lee Strobel if Jesus was a real person, and he says,
Actually, this court already affirmed it when we were called into session and the date was given. BC and AD.
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
Now, with the information I have, I do think Jesus was probably a historical person. I don't know. You know, I could get new information and change my mind. That's just what I think. Probably he was a real person. But obviously that doesn't prove anything supernatural or spiritual. That's why, like, even if Jesus did exist as a person, it's not really a problem for a lot of atheists because there's a lot of made up things about historical figures anyway, that just because the historical figure existed doesn't mean the stories surrounding them existed. This happens with so many people throughout history, like George Washington and the chopping down of the cherry tree, stuff like that. We don't think that happened. Then in the court, the one pastor just faints. Sorry, I forgot to bring this up. The pastor who's been in this movie and the last movie, he got chose by one of the jurors. The evil atheist lawyer tried to get him out, but then John, Sabrina's lawyer, was like, you can't discriminate against him just because he's a Christian. So he got to stay. But for some reason, he just fainted. And of course, this was the atheist lawyer response to that.
I hope you're not too attached to your appendix.
Just the most evil smile you've ever seen. He's happy, I guess. Okay, so now John brings up another person to talk. His name is James Wallace. He wrote the book Cold Case for Christianity. Dude, I'm telling you, there's all these, like, I don't think ad is the right word, but there's all these, like, promoting of, like, books and, like, companies and organizations. It's just so odd to me. Like, I don't know. The whole thing kind of felt like that Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show, where he's just living life and not recognizing all the ads that are happening around him. But basically, they brought this guy up as an authority to tell us Jesus said what he really said in the Bible. His explanation as to how exactly he knows that does not make any sense to me. But, I mean, you can watch it and see for yourself. He basically is just saying, like, the Bible is proof for Jesus. And, yeah, we know for a lot of us, that's, like, plugging an extension cord into itself. The evil lawyer brings up this is like one of my favorite parts, okay? The evil lawyer brings up contradictions, and James says, no, those are fine because they are viewing it from different perspective, which, yeah, I agree, because it's man-made, it's not from God, so it makes sense that everyone would write it from their perspective, which is why we have, like, contradictions and stuff like that. I don't know. But, yeah, I agree. And then James drops a bombshell.
I began examining the Gospels as a committed skeptic, not as a believer.
And you would have thought that someone, like, took everything away from this evil lawyer that he loved, because the look on his face was like he was just so devastated. And then James talks about how he doesn't talk about Jesus because he was born in it and raised in it, but because he knows it's the truth, giving the message that people don't only believe in this because they're raised in it, right? Like, they just come to the conclusion that this is the truth. But after he says all that, the lawyer says, strike that. we can't let that be remembered. I just got so severely owned. He's pissed off, guys. He's so pissed off. Now the student busts in and she yells, she didn't do anything wrong. My teacher didn't do anything wrong. Sabrina didn't do anything wrong. Then they call her to witness for some reason, and the judge says, you sure you want to do this? And she says,
I'm not afraid of telling the truth. I'm only afraid of not being able to tell it.
You know, because those dirty atheists are trying to stop her from telling the truth. She essentially goes up, and they conclude that the girl was asking a history question, and the teacher just answered a history oh my gosh, why can't I talk? A history question. Then the evil atheist asks Brooke if the teacher has talked about Christianity any other time, and the student talks about how she saw her at the coffee shop and she talked about the death of her brother, and then he gets her to confess. The evil lawyer gets Brooke to confess she's a Christian. He's like, are you a Christian now? And she's like, yeah. And the entire courtroom gasps for some reason. It's so shocking to everybody that this girl is part of the most popular belief system in the United States. Sabrina's really sad now because she thinks she's gonna lose. But later in the night, she gets a knock at the door, and it's Christmas carolers for some reason. I hear the roll. But then they show the news again, and the anchor says,
Christians are soon going to be forced to choose between obeying the law of man or following the word of God.
Now, this was, like, low-key scary to me because I feel like that's some, like, Crusaders stuff, like, or Crusade stuff, like, well, it's either God or, like, listening to the law. Like, that's kind of scary to hear from people, you know, because we want you to not, you know, break the law and hurt other people or take other rights away from people or whatever it might be. And then at the end of that, he said, I'm Mike Huckabee. I had to look up who that was because it sounded so familiar, but I don't really know anything about Mike Huckabee. I've just heard the name. I knew he was in politics, but yeah, like, sure enough, he's a Christian nationalist politician. Consider me shocked. Outside the courthouse, there are protesters, Christians versus atheists. So, of course, all of the Christians are holding hands lovingly while smiling and, you know, in positive spirits, while the atheists are angry and yelling in their faces. Then we're back in the courtroom. where John decides to call one last witness, Sabrina the teenage witch. And he says, and he's like, say sorry, Grace. And she's like, what the hell? Why is my lawyer turning on me? He knows I'm not sorry for what I said. And then she's like, no, I can't. And then he's like, didn't you say Jesus asked you something? And he's like yelling at her, and she's like sobbing, and she's like, that was personal. You weren't supposed to tell anybody. And then he's like, no, tell me what you asked God. And like he keeps berating her, and eventually he goes, like, what did you say? And she's like, I asked him, who do you say that I am? Or no, sorry. God asks Sabrina. He's asking what God said to her because he's explained that God spoke to her. And she thinks that he's making her sound crazy, like on purpose to betray her. I don't know. And so she says that God asked, who do you say that I am? And John says, what did you say? And she said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then he's doing this sarcasm thing where he's like, let's stomp out her faith. Let's get rid of her. Just to be clear, again, John is being extremely extreme to show the jury that it's so ridiculous to ask this teacher to not talk about God in school. So he compares it to Christians being arrested for believing in God, having their property taken away, and being offed. That's crazy.
And if someone slips through the cracks and hides their beliefs, then we arrest them and fine them. And if they don't pay, then we seize their property. And if they resist, well, let's not kid ourselves. Enforcement is always at the end of a gun.
Then he goes on a little rant about people being offended. This is the most Christian nationalist MAGA movie, well, that's a mouthful, I've ever seen. But we are on movie 2, so I'm sure it gets worse. Now we are finally here, guys. Deliberation time, baby. But first, another Newsboys concert. At this Newsboys concert, they talk about Sabrina being on trial for her faith. The entire crowd prays for her. My question is, do every single one of these movies end in a Newsboys concert? Guess we'll find out. I'll let you guys know. And now, the results of the deliberation. Was she found guilty? No. No, she was not. So Sabrina got her happy ending in the end. And then everyone cheers. And then there's this funny, I just have to add this for some reason. There's this funny moment where one of the jurors was like alternative. She was like a young girl and she looked alternative. Like she had blue hair, she had a septum piercing, all this stuff. And when she goes to walk out of the courtroom, she looks at Sabrina and she's like, and then Sabrina's all like, what's going on? This girl can't believe in God. And then when the alternative girl's walking out of the courtroom, she sees a tattooed cross on her neck. I know, it's just so crazy that someone who isn't exactly like you or someone who's alternative can believe in God. I don't know. It was such a silly scene. Now we're back at the Newsboys concert. And of course the classic,
God's not dead.
So they won.
Not to mention you proved the existence of Jesus Christ.
Apparently they also proved Jesus was real. I must have missed that. And then the crowd starts chanting, God's not dead, he's surely alive, which personally, I'm so tired of hearing that. Ever since I started watching these movies, my husband does it, like, just to be funny, and so I've heard, God's not dead, he's surely alive, so many times. Let's review my main issues with this movie, okay? Before the sun goes down, it's getting dark. Obviously, the insane persecution depiction of Christians goes as far to suggest that Christians would be thrown into prison or killed for simply believing in God. All of this because they want separation of church and state. So because these people want separation of church and state, God forbid, they start acting like they're going to get locked up and killed because they're Christians, which is so crazy. Like, what is this jump? When in reality, Christians hold the majority of the power in the United States, especially now with the rise of Christian nationalism. 10 Commandments are being put in schools. We have people like Ryan Walters, who is trying to get the Trump Bible specifically put into each and every classroom, aka the most Christian nationalist Bible you can find. And of course, number 2, the demonization of atheists, which I assume is going to be a big part of the plot in every single one of these movies. Number 3, the demonizing of education, again, especially with the comment about the Ivy League schools, about how they would love to give a student for a free ride for having Jesus talked for having a teacher talk about Jesus to them, so bizarre. Going back to everything else, it just oozes Christian nationalism. I'm certain it only progressively gets worse. I'm just gonna assume that. So anyways, I hope you guys like this video. Maybe watching this and my commentary is easier than watching the actual movie. It's a hard watch. But yeah, I hope everyone is taking care of yourselves. I hope you guys are doing good. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.